The sky above Earth was calm for only a second. Then it split open. A burning white line tore across the clouds like a wound in the heavens. The air screamed as pressure waves shattered windows from New York to New Delhi. For a moment, the world stood still, everyone staring upward, watching the impossible unfold. Something vast descended from that light. Something that should not exist. It was not a ship. It was not even a shape that the human mind could easily hold. It shimmered like smoke and lightning, twisting through dimensions that flickered in and out of reality. Its edges bled into colors no one had names for. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were two burning stars that stared down upon the planet with cold arrogance. And then it spoke. The voice didn't come from the sky. It came from inside every head. Every man, woman, and child felt it echo in their bones. Kneel, bow before the one who shaped the stars. I am Jamorath, sovereign of creation. Submit, and your suffering shall end. The words struck like thunder. Airplanes fell from the sky. People dropped to their knees in terror. Power grids failed as reality itself seemed to hum in obedience. But not everyone bowed. In a dim, underground bunker below the ruins of old Geneva, a woman in battle-scarred armor stared at a flickering screen showing the entity's arrival. Her name was Captain Elise Tran, a war survivor, a soldier of the Europa campaign, and the kind of human who had lost too much to ever kneel again. Around her, engineers and soldiers scrambled to send emergency signals, but the frequencies were jammed. The entity's presence had seized every channel on Earth. And still that voice continued. Your kind crawled from the mud because I willed it. You built fire, cities, weapons, all gifts of my design. Now you will return to your place. Kneel and be spared. Elise clenched her fists. The words echoed inside her skull, pressing on her mind like claws trying to break in. Around her, others were gasping, whispering prayers, or simply shaking in fear. But Elise stood up. Turn the comms back on, she said quietly. One of her technicians looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Captain, it's no use. It's broadcasting across everything, even the quantum bands. Then give me something, she snapped. One open line, I don't care where it goes. After a few seconds of furious typing, a weak transmission line blinked green. It wasn't much, just enough to push a few seconds of voice across the static of a dying network. Elise stepped up to the microphone, staring at her reflection in the cracked glass. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. This is Captain Elise Tran of the United Earth Defense Network, she began. To whoever or whatever you are, we don't kneel to monsters, we don't kneel to kings, and we sure as hell don't kneel to something that shows up claiming to be a god. The technicians froze. Some gaped at her in disbelief. Others looked inspired. Static hissed across the channel, and then the voice of Jamorath returned, louder this time, filled with anger that cracked the skis. You defy me. Elise almost smiled. We've been defying God since we learned how to stand. Across the planet, chaos erupted. Whole religions collapsed overnight. Some called Jamorath divine justice. Others called it the end of evolution. The governments of Earth were silent, their leaders paralyzed by the enormity of what had arrived. But ordinary people weren't. Miners in Australia armed their drills. Soldiers on the lunar base powered up orbital railguns. Pilots strapped themselves into fighter cockpits without waiting for orders. A million small acts of defiance spread like sparks across the dark. And somewhere deep in orbit, inside the United Earth flagship Helios, an AI voice broke the silence of command. Captain Elise Tran, signal received, message acknowledged, we are not kneeling. The words spread across the human network like wildfire. Jamorath watched it all from above. The being had conquered 1,000 civilizations before, empires with star fleets, plasma fortresses, and faiths that stretched across galaxies. All had fallen to their knees when faced with his voice. But humanity was wrong. They didn't surrender, they didn't beg, they mocked. One hacker somewhere in North America broadcasted the words, "not kneeling," across every surviving satellite. Within minutes, billions joined. The god's light flickered. Its cosmic aura shimmered in confusion. You dare laugh before divinity? From the Helios command deck, Elise stared up at the holographic projection of the creature's face, enormous, bright, and pulsing with rage. "We've bowed before tyrants, gods, and our own fears," she said softly, "and every time we stood up again." She leaned closer to the console and whispered, "We don't kneel twice." The stars trembled. Jamorath's voice turned into a scream that shook the moon's surface. Every machine on Earth buzzed with static as energy levels spiked beyond comprehension. "Then die as the broken things you are." And just like that, the sky turned crimson. The first strike of divine wrath fell, a beam of light that carved through the Atlantic like a blade, vaporizing everything in its path. But even as the oceans boiled and the continents burned, humanity did not pray for mercy. They aimed their weapons skyward. The war between mortals and a god had begun. The oceans burned. Cities turned to glass. And still, humanity refused to kneel. Jamorath hovered above the earth like a storm of light and shadow, his presence twisting the clouds into spirals of fire. Every word he spoke warped gravity. Mountains bent, oceans rose, and the moon's orbit shifted by a fraction, enough to make tides scream across coastlines. "You were offered peace," the god's voice boomed through the atmosphere. "Instead, you choose defiance. You think your weapons can harm me." The ground cracked beneath his voice. Yet below the smoke and ruin, deep inside command bunkers, the humans were still fighting. In the underground control room beneath Mount Athena, Captain Elise Tran stood surrounded by flickering holograms of destroyed cities. Entire countries had gone dark. The communications network was failing, but her expression remained calm, cold, even. "Status of the Helios rail platform?" she asked. "Orbiting Mars," replied Lieutenant Kova. "Power cells at 92%. We can fire once." Elise looked up at the live feed of the creature hanging over Earth, a vast, shimmering being whose light painted half the planet white. Her jaw tightened. "Then we fire once." The room went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The rail platform carried the spear of Prometheus, humanity's largest kinetic weapon. It was built for asteroid defense, never for war, but war had found them anyway. "Target locked," the AI confirmed. "Trajectory upper atmosphere, estimated hit time 43 seconds. Elise's voice was steady. "Fire." In the void above Mars, a massive railgun extended from the Helios platform. Magnetic coils hummed, charging with power stolen from the Martian colony's fusion grid. The projectile, a tungsten rod the size of a skyscraper, was launched into space at a tenth of light speed. A flash brighter than the sun burst across the stars as it left orbit. It cut through space, tearing reality with it. Back on Earth, Jamorath turned his head slightly, sensing something coming. He didn't even move to defend himself. "Pitiful, you throw stones at infinity." And then the stone hit. The impact struck with the force of a planet. A wave of light exploded across the upper atmosphere, blinding satellites and shattering every remaining window on Earth. For the first time, the god flinched. The humans watching the feed gasped. Jamorath's luminous body rippled, not with light, but with pain. His voice cracked the air again, but this time it carried disbelief. "You dare." On the ground, Elise allowed herself a small smile. "Welcome to Earth." The god's rage was immediate. Lightning erupted from his form, spreading across the globe like veins of fire. Energy storms swallowed continents. In seconds, cities that had survived the first wave of destruction were turned into ash. Yet amid that horror, something unexpected happened. The orbital feed caught a signal faint but alive. The Helios platform was still transmitting. General Singh, commanding from Lunar Base Horizon, leaned over his console. Helios report, status of the strike. The reply came through a storm of static. Direct hit confirmed, target destabilized, we hurt him. The last two words echoed through every surviving command center. We hurt him. The idea spread like wildfire through the survivors. Across ruined cities, through emergency channels, whispered in bunkers and broadcast over ham radios. The god can bleed. It wasn't just information, it was hope. Jamarath's fury shook the heavens. He extended a hand toward Mars, and the space around the planet ripped open. Half of Mars' surface turned into a burning wound of red plasma. The Helios platform vanished in a flash of light. But it didn't matter. The message was already sent. Humanity knew now, a god could be hurt. On Earth, Elise stood before her surviving officers. The bunker trembled from distant quakes, but she ignored it. Transmission from the lunar base confirms impact damage to the entity's structure, said a young officer, voice trembling. Elise turned to her team. Her armor was scratched, her face was pale, but her eyes were bright with something fierce, almost holy. Then it's not a god, she said. It's just another bully who forgot what humans do to bullies. The room was silent for a heartbeat, then someone laughed. Another joined, then another. The sound grew louder, rougher, not madness but defiance. They were laughing at a god. Up above, Jamarath glared down through the storm clouds, his voice seething. You mock the eternal, you think yourselves strong. I will unmake your world, I will erase your species from memory. Elise raised her eyes toward the cracked monitor showing his glowing form. Her voice was quiet, but steady enough to be heard by every survivor tuned into the broadcast. You already tried to erase us, she said. We're still here. The being froze for just a moment. That human calm, that infuriating steadiness, it didn't fit in any law of power he knew. He'd faced entire empires, species that built suns and tore down dimensions, but none had ever spoken to him like equals. The humans didn't act like prey, they acted like a threat. In the quiet that followed, Elise looked at the map of Earth, continents broken, oceans bleeding red from fire, cities gone. Yet small blinking dots still pulsed across the surface, surviving strongholds, underground networks, space outposts. Life. Defiance. Humanity. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We hold the line." Outside, the god began to reform, his light coiling into a massive storm over the horizon. The next battle was coming, and humanity would face it, not as servants but as soldiers. The age of gods was ending, and the age of humans had just begun. The days after the first strike were silent. No birds, no radios, no sunlight. Only the sound of wind, whispering through the ruins of what was once Earth cities. But underground, under the ashes, humanity was still alive. Captain Elise Tran stood in the bunker command room, surrounded by screens filled with static. Every transmission carried only fragments of voices, distress calls, prayer lines, laughter that sounded too close to madness. Yet even through the despair, something had changed. They had hurt the god. The myth of Jamarath's invincibility was gone, and when fear dies, defiance begins. Elise stood before the remaining officers of the United Earth Defense. Their uniforms were torn, their faces hollow, but their eyes burned with the same quiet rage. "We're scattered," she said, her voice echoing through the cold metal chamber. "Our cities are gone, our fleets are gone, but we still have our minds, and that's one thing he'll never understand." General Singh nodded from the other side of the hollow table. "The Prometheus team is ready, Captain. We've secured fragments of the entity's energy from the first impact. Dr. Marquez believes we can study it, maybe even use it. Elise's brow furrowed. Use Godfear, that's suicide. Maybe, Singh said, or maybe it's the only way to kill him. Far below the surface, in a laboratory carved beneath the mountains, Dr. Elena Marquez stared into a containment chamber. Inside, a sphere of light floated, pulsing slowly, alive, unstable and furious. It was a fragment of Jamorath's being, captured after the railgun strike had wounded him. The energy glowed with a soft blue radiance, almost beautiful, until the lights flickered and the sphere shuddered, whispering in voices not human. "You cannot touch the divine," it hissed, its sound like 1,000 souls speaking at once. Elena clenched her jaw. "I just did," she whispered. She turned to her assistants. "Prepare the matrix. We're turning Godfire into a weapon." That was the birth of Project Prometheus. It began as a desperate idea, to harness the enemy's own energy and fire it back at him. The humans knew they could not outmatch a god with brute force, but they could outthink him. Teams across the remaining colonies and stations worked day and night. Every scientist, every engineer, every surviving AI, all focused on one goal: to make Prometheus burn bright enough to reach the heavens. The project required sacrifice. Radiation levels in the labs were fatal. Many of the scientists died before seeing their work completed. They called it burning with the gods. But still they worked, because for every life lost, 10 more volunteered. Humanity had found something even stronger than fear: purpose. Meanwhile, Jamorath recovered above Jupiter. His wounds glowed like cracks in a dying star, his voice echoing across the void. "You insects, you scar my flesh and call it victory. You play with the embers of creation and think yourselves gods." He began gathering power again, swallowing moons, feeding on the storms of Jupiter, preparing to descend once more and end humanity for good. He believed they were broken. He believed they were finished. He was wrong. Back on Earth, Prometheus was ready. Elise stood before the launch chamber, a colossal tunnel lined with glowing machinery that hummed like a living heart. At its center, the Prometheus cannon waited. It was unlike any weapon ever built, a fusion of human steel and alien light, powered by the stolen fragment of Jamorath's own essence. Dr. Marquez stood beside her, hands trembling. "Once we fire this, there's no turning back. The containment field won't hold for long. It could burn us all." Elise nodded. "Then we burn together." The doctor gave a sad smile. "You sound like a god yourself." Elise shook her head. "No, just human." The signal went out across the remnants of the human network. Every surviving outpost, Earth, Luna, Mars, and the scattered space colonies, received the same message. "This is Captain Elise Tran. Operation Prometheus begins now. For every city lost, for every life stolen, for every child who will never see the stars again, we light the fire." Jamorath sensed it. His voice thundered through space. "What are you doing, mortals?" Elise looked up through the cracked ceiling of the command center, eyes hard. "Finishing what you started." The Prometheus cannon roared. The sky tore open again, but this time it wasn't a god descending. It was human fire rising. The beam shot into orbit, straight toward the glowing mass of Jamorath above Jupiter. The energy screamed across space like 1,000 burning suns. For a moment, the god raised his hand to absorb it, confident, arrogant. And then he felt pain. Real pain. His scream echoed across the solar system. Planets shook, moons shattered, the god's luminous body dimmed, his vast form collapsing in on itself. "Impossible," he cried. "How can you wield what is mine?" Elise whispered through the comms. "Because you made the mistake of teaching us how." The light faded, the cannon went silent. Every human bunker waited in breathless silence for what would come next. When the dust cleared, Jamorath was still alive but wounded, deeply. His light flickered, His shape trembled. The god retreated into the cold shadow of Jupiter, hiding, burning, bleeding. And from the shattered earth came the quiet, unified voice of a species that refused to die. "He bleeds," Elise said softly, "and if he bleeds, we can kill him." The war was far from over. But for the first time in history, humanity looked at a god and smiled. For the first time in eternity, a god fled. Jamorath hid behind Jupiter's swirling storms, his wounded body pulsing with fatting light. Each beat of his heart cracked the void with pain. He had devoured stars, crushed empires, and made galaxies sing his name. Yet now he bled because of humans. He could not comprehend it. "Mortals," he hissed into the dark, "you are supposed to worship, not wound." His fury spread across the cosmos like a signal, a cry for vengeance that reached his followers scattered among the stars. Entire alien species that had worshipped him as the eternal flame received his call. They saw their god wounded and screamed in horror. And then they came. Elise watched from Earth's last orbital defense station as thousands of bright dots appeared on the deep space radar. At first, she thought they were meteors. Then the screen zoomed in. Each dot was a ship, sleek, silver, and alive, glowing with energy. "Multiple fleets approaching from all quadrants," said Lieutenant Kova, his voice trembling. "Estimates suggest billions of enemy vessels. It's a full galactic armada." Elise stared at the glowing swarm approaching through the void. "He called for help," she whispered. General Singh's face appeared on the holographic display from Lunar Command. His voice was steady but grave. "He's bringing every species that ever worshipped him. They're not coming to negotiate." "Then we don't negotiate either," Elise said. The alien armada darkened the stars. They moved like a tide, slow and relentless, their weapons charged with divine energy. Behind them, Jamorath's shadow loomed, larger than any planet watching. The god's voice echoed through the human networks once again. "You see now how small you are. Kneel, and I may let you die without pain." Elise's lips curved into a thin smile. "You still don't understand us." She opened a secure line to every surviving human stronghold: Earth, the Moon, Mars, and the orbital colonies. "This is Captain Elise Tran. The enemy is coming not to conquer but to erase. If they win, no one will remember we ever existed. But I want you to remember this: we already made their god bleed. Now we finish what we started." There was silence for a moment. Then one by one, voices began to reply. "Lunar Command standing by. Martian fleet ready to fire. Titan outpost awaiting orders. Helios survivors locked and loaded." Humanity's flame, small but unbroken, roared back to life. The battle began with light. From the blackness of space, the alien fleet opened fire. Beams of divine energy lanced toward the inner planets, vaporizing asteroids and burning holes through orbiting stations. Earth's defenses lit up in reply. Railguns, plasma turrets, and Prometheus cannons fired in perfect rhythm, turning space into a sea of fire. Ships exploded like dying stars. Fragments of alien vessels rained down through the atmosphere, glowing red as they burned. On the ground, humans watched the night sky turn into a battlefield of colors: blue, gold, and red streaks slicing through the heavens. Children in underground shelters pointed upward, whispering, "We're fighting gods." And their parents answered, "No, we're fighting for home." High above the earth, Elise's ship, the Valkyrie, cut through the chaos. "Target their carriers," she shouted. "If they bring reinforcements through that wormhole, we're finished." The Valkyrie banked hard as enemy fire grazed its hull, molten sparks spraying into the void. Elise gripped the console as her pilot fought to stabilize the ship. "Plasma levels critical," the AI reported. "Divert all power to the forward cannons," she ordered. "Captain," the AI warned, "that will disable the shields." Elise didn't hesitate. "Then we die shooting." The Valkyrie fired. The beam struck the largest enemy carrier dead center, splitting it in half. The explosion was so massive it created a brief sunrise in space. Cheers erupted across the comms. "Direct hit," someone yelled. But the celebration didn't last. The wormhole behind Jupiter shimmered again, this time wider. More ships began pouring through. Dr. Marquez's voice came through the channel. "Elise, they're using a gravitational relay. If we destroy it, we can stop reinforcements." "How?" Elise demanded. "With the Prometheus core," Marquez said quietly. "But it's unstable. If you overload it, it'll collapse everything, including us." Elise looked out at the endless tide of ships filling the stars. There was no other choice. "Do it." As the Prometheus core charged, energy rippled across space like a heartbeat. Every alien sensor detected it too late. The cannon fired. The beam wasn't aimed at a ship this time, but at space itself. It hit the wormhole, tearing it apart. The resulting shockwave devoured the entire center of the enemy fleet, ripping ships into dust. The explosion painted Jupiter's shadow in fire. When the light faded, silence filled the void. The alien armada billions strong was gone. Only wreckage remained. But the cost was high. The Prometheus station was gone too. Every scientist, every engineer who had fueled it had vanished in the blast. Elise stood on the deck of the Valkyrie, watching the debris drift through the dark. Her voice was soft but strong. "They gave us a future. We won't waste it." In the silence that followed, Jamarath's voice echoed once more. "You destroy your own to destroy mine. What kind of creatures are you?" Elise looked up toward the wounded god, her eyes filled with the cold fire of defiance. "The kind that doesn't kneel." The being trembled. For the first time he felt something he had never known: fear. Humanity had shattered a god's army. The throne of the eternal sovereign was no longer untouchable. But Jamarath was not done. And humanity, bloodied but unbroken, was not done either. The final war was coming. And this time it would be personal. The battle for the skis had ended, but Earth was broken. The oceans boiled, the cities were scars, and the air smelled like burned metal. The stars themselves looked dimmer, as if the universe held its breath. In the quiet, survivors walked among the ruins, bloodied, hungry, and trembling, yet still standing. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had shattered the armies of a god. But Jamarath was not dead. He floated above the planet like a wounded sun, his vast body cracked with molten light, his once thunderous voice now heavy with rage and disbelief. "You destroy my legions, you scar my realm," the god whispered, his words echoing like distant thunder. "You are nothing, yet you defy eternity." His voice was quieter now, but colder, more dangerous. Captain Elise Tran stood atop the ruins of New Geneva, the same city where she had first refused to kneel. The air around her shimmered with heat. Dust covered her uniform, and her face bore the lines of too many sleepless nights, but her eyes were sharp and still burning. From the shattered streets, survivors looked up at the massive shadow blotting out the sky. Jamarath's light spread across the clouds like veins of fire. His gaze fell upon Elise, as though the god himself remembered her voice. "You," he said, "the defiant one, you mock me before your kind. You wow me before my followers. Do you understand what you have done?" Elise didn't flinch. She lifted her head and shouted, her voice carrying through the burning wind. "Yes, we reminded you that even gods can bleed." The god's face twisted with fury. "You miserable creatures, I gave you the stars, I gave you life. You were made to obey." "Then you made us wrong," she said. Jamarath descended lower, his vast form casting shadows that stretched for miles. His light pressed against the ground, forcing soldiers to their knees. The air grew heavy, crushing lungs and bending steel. Some people started to collapse, unable to breathe. Children cried. Men gasped. But Elise stayed on her feet even as her knees trembled. She raised one arm and pointed her weapon toward the blinding light. "Stand up," she shouted to the crowd behind her. "Don't give him what he wants." Her voice cut through the fear like a blade. Slowly one soldier rose, then another, then hundreds, then thousands. Across the ruins every survivor stood. Farmers, engineers, soldiers, mothers holding children, all of them facing the sky, unarmed but unbroken. Their bodies shook, but they did not kneel. Jamarath stared at them, his blazing eyes wide with something almost human, confusion. "What are you doing? I am offering mercy." Elise's voice came again, steady, defiant. "We've had enough mercy from gods. Every empire that asked for our loyalty fell. Every tyrant who demanded worship burned. You're just the next in line." The god's roar shook the planet. The ground cracked open. "You dare laugh before the eternal." And then humanity did. From behind Elise, someone began to laugh. It was small at first, broken, the laugh of a man who had nothing left to lose. Then another joined. Then another. Soon, the entire field of survivors was laughing, raw, bitter, fearless laughter that echoed up into the heavens. Jamarath froze. No army, no civilization, no species had ever laughed at him before. They wept, they begged, they prayed, but they never mocked. For the first time since the dawn of creation, a god knew humiliation. Above the Earth, in the last surviving orbital command base, Dr. Marquez watched the scene unfold through a cracked monitor. She turned to her assistant. "They're holding him," she said softly. "They're actually holding him there with Will alone." She activated a console. "Prepare the neural network. If we channel the surviving population's link through the Prometheus core, we might amplify it." Her assistant's eyes widened. "That could burn every mind on the planet." Marquez smiled sadly. "Then let's make sure the last thing we burn is a god." Back on Earth, Elise felt the vibration under her boots as the network reactivated. A faint hum filled the air, spreading across the survivors. Their minds, connected by the quantum field, began to resonate together. Billions of human thoughts, emotions, and memories merged into one single, roaring pulse. Love, pain, loss, hope. Every heartbeat, every scream, every dream. Jamarath stepped back, his glowing form flickering. "What is this?" he cried. Elise's voice carried through the storm. "It's everything you never understood us." The sky began to glow. The collective will of humanity, billions of souls, flared brighter than the gods' light. Jamarath tried to rise, but the weight of their defiance pressed down on him like gravity itself. You cannot defy creation." Elise shouted over the roaring storm, her voice breaking but filled with fire. "We are creation." The light of humanity's unity burned through the clouds, forming a beam that pierced the heavens. Jamarath screamed as his power cracked apart. His massive form began to fragment, his divine armor shattering into a storm of light. "No, I am eternal." Elise took one step forward. "Not anymore." The god fell, a collapsing sun breaking apart in the sky. His light faded, swallowed by the night. When the silence came, it was endless. The survivors stood among the ruins, looking at the stars that once trembled before their enemy. Elise lowered her head and whispered, half to herself, half to the universe. "You told us to bow, but we were never built for that." Jamarath was gone, but his ashes still drifted across the stars, whispering in disbelief. And on that broken world, under the faint light of dawn, humanity stood together, scarred, smaller than gods, but infinitely more powerful. Because they had proven one truth that no being could erase. Humans do not kneel. The sky was still burning. Even as Jamarath's body broke apart, his light refused to fade completely. It lingered, alive, angry, desperate, trying to pull itself back together. High above the ruined earth, Fragments of his essence drifted like pieces of a shattered sun. Each one pulsed with terrible power. Each one screamed in silence. And still humanity stood weak, starving, trembling, but standing. Captain Elise Tran looked up from the ruins of New Geneva, her face glowing in the eerie light. She could feel the presence of the god's energy even now, pressing against her mind like a hand made of fire. "He's not gone," she whispered. General Singh's voice crackled through the comms, distorted but clear. "Confirmed, he's trying to reform. The readings are off the scale. If he succeeds, we won't survive another round." Elise's eyes narrowed. "Then we end this before he does." In orbit, Dr. Elena Marquez watched the chaos from the Horizon station. Every screen around her showed fragments of Jamorath's energy crawling across the upper atmosphere, searching for one another, seeking to reunite. She typed furiously, pulling up data from the Prometheus core, the same weapon they had used before. But this time, it wasn't enough. Then she saw it, the neural resonance pattern left from humanity's earlier unity. The psychic connection that had flared when every human stood together against the god's command. She realized what it meant. It wasn't the weapon that had hurt him. It was them. The humans themselves, their combined will, their defiance, their shared rage had become the true weapon. "Of course," she whispered, eyes wide. "He was never afraid of our machines, he was afraid of our minds." Back on Earth, Elise gathered the remaining survivors in what was left of the command network. Static filled the screens as she spoke. "Listen to me, he's trying to rise again. We don't have ships left. We don't have cannons left, but we still have what he can't take us." She paused, her voice rough but full of fire. "He called himself eternal. He called us dust, but dust can become a storm if it moves together." Across the planet, people listened in bunkers, on broken radios, through damaged neural links. Her words spread like a heartbeat. "We're going to do this one last time. Every mind, every thought connect to the network. Feed everything you are into the Prometheus core. Every memory, every pain, every dream. Let him see what it means to be human." There was fear, there was silence. Then one by one, people began to connect. Farmers, soldiers, mothers, children. Billions of minds linked into one. Jamorath's form pulsed again above the planet, half reformed, half burning. His voice rumbled across the atmosphere. "You insects cannot destroy what was here before your son was born. You cannot kill eternity." Elise's voice answered, not alone this time, but as one with every human voice on Earth. It wasn't a shout, but a calm, steady whisper that echoed through space. "We don't need to kill eternity. We just need to remind it that it can fall." The sky turned white. The Prometheus core ignited. But this time, it wasn't fueled by machines or godfire. It was powered by human will. A beam of pure energy shot into the heavens, brighter than any star. It wasn't cold or sterile, it burned with emotion. Love, anger, loss, hope, all of it fused into a single unstoppable force. Jamorath screamed. His body convulsed, his light twisting as the beam struck his core. "This is not power," he roared. "This is chaos." "No," Elise replied through the link. "This is life." The god's form began to unravel. His voice fractured into 1,000 screams. The energy that once held galaxies together now turned against him, tearing his essence apart atom by atom. He tried to run. He tried to reach the stars again, but the pull of humanity's collective will dragged him down. For the first time, the eternal sovereign fell. From the surface, people saw it, a falling light, blazing brighter than the sun. The ground shook. The sky turned gold. Jamorath crashed into the upper atmosphere, breaking apart completely. His remains scattered across the horizon like falling stars. For a moment, the night was beautiful. Then came the silence, deep, final, peaceful. In the aftermath, the neural network slowly disconnected. People collapsed, exhausted. Many didn't wake again. Those who did found tears on their faces, not from pain, but from something else, something that felt like peace. Dr. Marquez wept at her console, whispering to no one, "We did it. We actually did it." Elise fell to her knees among the ashes, staring at the sky where the god had fallen. The air smelled like rain for the first time in years. General Singh's voice came through faintly on the comms. "Elise, he's gone. Readings are 0, it's over." She didn't answer right away. She just closed her eyes and breathed. For the first time there was no static in the air, no trembling in the earth, only silence. Then softly she said, "No gods left, no chains left." As dawn broke over the horizon, the survivors stepped out of their shelters. Children pointed at the faint streaks of light across the morning sky, the last traces of Jamorath's essence drifting into space. One little girl whispered, "Was that really a god?" Her mother smiled weakly and said, "No, just something that forgot what it meant to live." In the quiet aftermath of a world reborn, Captain Elise Tran looked toward the rising sun. The reflection of the light shimmered in her tired eyes. "He thought he was eternal," she murmured, "but eternity dies when nobody believes in it anymore." And with that, she turned and walked back toward her people, the survivors, the builders, the last and first children of a free world. Because humanity had done what no civilization in history had ever done before. They hadn't just killed a god. They had outlived one. The war was over. But the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Jamorath, the god who had ruled galaxies, who had demanded worship and burned worlds, was gone. His ashes drifted among the stars, faint ribbons of light that flickered and died one by one. On Earth, the air finally cooled. The storm stopped. For the first time in centuries, the sun rose without a red haze. The world smelled of dust, metal, and new beginnings. Humanity had survived. Captain Elise Tran stood on a hill of rubble overlooking what had once been New Geneva. The morning light reflected off twisted steel and cracked glass. Around her, survivors worked silently, building fires, sharing food, tending to the wounded. It was not victory music, it was quiet, real. And in that silence, something sacred was born: peace. Dr. Elena Marquez recorded the last entry in her digital journal aboard Horizon Station. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were bright. The entity's energy signature has vanished completely. No traces remain. Jamorath is truly gone. We did what the galaxy thought impossible. She looked out the viewport. The stars looked closer now, no longer distant, no longer unreachable. But the cost, I don't even know how many of us are left. Entire continents are gone. Yet somehow, the human spirit burns brighter than before. Maybe that's what gods never understood. We don't need perfection to be eternal. She turned off the recorder and whispered, "Goodbye, old world." In the outer colonies of the galaxy, word spread fast. Alien races that had once bowed to Jamorath felt the tremors of his fall. Entire temples of light flickered and went dark. For thousands of years, they had worshipped him as the eternal sovereign. Now, his voice was gone. Panic spread first, then confusion, then disbelief. But slowly, a new word began to pass through the star systems, whispered with awe and fear alike. Humans, the species that had killed a god. No empire had done it, no machine race, no hive mind, just humans, fragile, chaotic, short-lived beings from a small blue world at the edge of the spiral arm. To some, humanity became a myth, to others, a warning. Across the galaxy, the phrase appeared on every encrypted transmission, painted on broken walls, spoken in hushed tones by those who once prayed. They don't kneel twice. Back on Earth, months passed. The planet healed slowly. The survivors rebuilt from the ruins with calloused hands and quiet determination. Fields grew again where glass once glistened. Children laughed again under a sky that no longer burned. But the scars remained, reminders of what they had faced. Elise walked through the rebuilt command site one morning. Her uniform was faded, her body scarred, but she carried herself like someone who had looked death in the eye and refused to blink. She found a small crowd gathered around a memorial wall. Hundreds of names were carved into its dark stone, the fallen, the lost, the ones who had burned with Prometheus. At the center of the wall were the words, "We bowed once to survive, never again." She ran her fingers across the engraving, her throat tight. General Singh approached quietly beside her. His face was older now, his shoulders bent with years of war. "Elise," he said softly, "they're asking you to lead the Reconstruction Council. The people trust you." She smiled faintly. "I'm not a leader, General. I'm just the one who shouted loud enough to wake everyone up." Singh chuckled. "That's all leadership ever is." That night, the surviving global network reconnected for the first time since the war. Screens flickered to life in bunkers, settlements, and orbital stations. Billions tuned in to the broadcast. Elise stood before the camera, the faint glow of dawn behind her. Her voice carried across the planet and far beyond. "To all who can hear this, we are still here." She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "We've seen gods fall, we've watched our world burn, but we never stopped standing. Humanity has been broken before by wars, by greed, by arrogance. Yet every time we rise again, and this time we rise free." Her eyes lifted toward the stars. "They will come again, others like him, others who think we are small, but they will learn what Jamorath learned, that we are not creatures of surrender, we are creatures of will." She leaned closer to the camera. "We don't kneel twice." The message spread beyond Earth, carried by old satellites and newly rebuilt relays. Across space, alien worlds intercepted it. Some trembled, others cheered. A few knelt before the transmission, but not in worship, in respect. Humanity had not just survived. It had changed the rules of the universe. Years later, in a small bar on Mars, an old soldier sat at the counter, staring out the window at the red desert sky. Two young alien travelers sat nearby, whispering about the ancient story they had heard of the god who fell and the humans who defied him. One of them turned to the old man and asked timidly, "Were you there when the eternal sovereign fell?" The man smiled, wrinkles deepening around his eyes. "Yeah," he said, "I was there." The alien leaned forward eagerly. "How did you do it? How did your kind defeat a god?" The old soldier took a slow sip of his drink, eyes distant, voice quiet but proud. "We didn't defeat him," he said. "We just reminded him who the real gods are." The aliens exchanged a confused glance. "And who is that?" The man smiled faintly and looked out toward the stars. "Us." Far beyond, in the cold edges of the galaxy, where Jamorath's ashes drifted, a single spark of his fading consciousness whispered into the void. "They laughed at me." Then silence. And the stars, once silent witnesses to empires and gods, now shone brighter, as if honoring the only species that had ever dared to look up at them and say, "No." Because humanity had proved the truth no god could erase. "We don't kneel twice."